He came home to smoke, rising from a chimney he hadn't lit in 6 months. Light glowing from a window he kept dark on purpose. And a smell, warm bread, thick stew, that hit him like a fist wrapped in a memory he'd spent 3 years trying to bury. A stranger was in his house, cooking at his stove, cleaning his floor. And somehow, that stranger was about to save everything he had left. This channel is home to stories of the American West, where love is earned in silence, where strangers become family, and where the human heart proves tougher than any frontier. What this story teaches us, the people who walk into our darkest rooms uninvited, are sometimes the ones carrying the light we forgot we needed. If that opening gave you chills, hit subscribe. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far these stories travel. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. Thank you for being part of our community.
Now let's get into it. Ethan wasn't a man who spooked easy. He'd faced down dangers that would make most men turn tail and run. For 3 years, he'd stood against the world alone, especially since the day he buried his wife, standing in the pouring rain without a single tear, because there was no one left to see them. So you can imagine his surprise when he pushed through his own front door and saw a young woman by the stove. Her eyes were a deep, dark brown, and they held something he couldn't quite place. It wasn't fear. It was something much older. "My name is Lydia Hart," she said, her voice steady. "And before you get any ideas about that rifle, you should know your supper is almost on the table." Ethan just stared. "Ma'am," he finally managed, "you are standing in my house." "I know," she replied. "Cooking on my stove." "Yes." He glanced around, truly seeing the room for the first time. She had cleaned the place up. The stack of dirty dishes was gone, washed and put away proper. The floor was swept clean. Even the old blanket he kept balled up in his chair was neatly folded. "You cleaned my house." "It was needin' it," she said, turning back to her cooking. For a long moment, Ethan stood there, rifle half raised, completely dumbfounded. He had expected to come home to the same cold, quiet emptiness he'd known since Clara passed. He sure as heck had not expected this. "How'd you get in?" he asked. "Your back window latch is broken." She looked over her shoulder at him. "You ought to fix that. Anybody could just waltz right in." "Somebody did," Ethan said, his voice flat. A tiny smile touched her lips for just a second. She took the pot off the stove and set out a bowl and spoon, like this was the most normal thing in the world, as if there wasn't a man with fire in his eyes standing right behind her. "Sit down," she told him. "Eat. I'll explain everything after." "You'll explain everything right now," Ethan demanded, "before I fetch the sheriff." She turned to face him, and that's when he truly saw her. Her dress was torn and caked with mud at the hem. One of her boots had been crudely stitched up with twine, and just peeking from under her sleeve was the faint yellowing edge of a bruise, maybe a few days old. Ethan lowered his rifle. He didn't put it away, but he lowered it. "Start talking," he said, his voice a low growl. Lydia pulled out a chair and sat, folding her hands on the table. She met his gaze without a hint of shame. "I was with a wagon train from Tucson," she began. 3 days ago, a flash flood hit our camp. We lost wagons and we lost a man." She paused. "I was traveling alone to meet a cousin in New Mexico. The flood took everything I had, and my mule had to be put down." She said it all matter-of-factly, the kind of way folks do when they've already cried all their tears in private. "I walked for 2 days to get to Dry Creek. The hotel wanted 15 cents a night, and I don't have 15 cents. Ethan stayed quiet. "The man at the feed store mentioned a rancher who lived alone a few miles east," she went on. "Said the place was neglected, and the owner didn't seem to care much. So I figured—" She looked down at her hands. I figured I could offer a trade. A good cleaning and some hot meals in exchange for a roof over my head for a few nights. So you just let yourself into a stranger's home? Ethan asked, still trying to wrap his head around it. I checked if anyone was here first, she corrected him. When no one was, I started a fire and got to cooking. I figured you'd either come home and accept my offer or you'd run me off. Either way, you'd at least have a decent meal. Ethan studied her for a long time, taking in the stitched boot and the bruised wrist. He saw the set of her shoulders, not defeated, just resolved. He finally sat down across from her. 3 days, he said. That's all you get. She nodded. And you'll sleep in the barn. She nodded again. I'm not a kind man, he warned her. I'm not asking for kindness, she shot back. I'm asking for a fair trade, work for shelter. Ethan picked up the spoon and took a bite of the stew. It was incredible. It tasted of warmth and herbs and something he couldn't name. It tasted like a life he thought he'd lost for good. He didn't say that, of course. Fine, he grumbled. 3 days. The next morning, she was up before him. That was the first surprise. He woke to the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen, and for the first time in 3 years, the tension in his shoulders eased just a bit. By the time he got his boots on, she had coffee ready and was staring out the window. Morning, she said without turning around. He poured a cup. You're always up this early? On a ranch you have to be, she said, finally facing him. Your east fence line is down for about 60 yards. The chickens aren't laying because a weasel's been getting in the coop through a hole in the back wall. And your water trough by the barn has a crack that's going to split wide open come the first freeze. Ethan put his coffee cup down slowly. How long have you been awake? He asked. Couple of hours, she said, as if it were nothing. She sat herself down and pulled out a list, written in fine, proper handwriting on the back of an old scrap of paper. It was a list of every last thing wrong with his place. Fences that needed mending, a broken trough, and shingles missing from the barn roof. Ethan just stared. Well, I'll be, he said. You've made a list of every problem on my ranch. She looked him square in the eye. No, sir. I made a list of what needs doing. There is a big difference. Her voice was steady and clear. Mr. Cole, I do not know what happened here, and it is not my business to ask. But I have been working ranches my whole life, and I can see this is good land. It has just been let go is all. She paused. 3 days is not enough to fix it, but it is a start. Ethan sat down, thinking. He thought about telling her to mind her own business. He thought about telling her that 3 days was all she had. What he said was, I will show you where I keep the tools. That woman worked like she was born for it. That is what Ethan could not figure out. She moved with a quiet purpose, like she already knew what every task took before she even began. She never asked for help or complained. She just worked, answering to the land itself, not to him. He found himself just watching her that first afternoon as she drove fence nails with clean, sure swings of the hammer. He walked over. Where did you learn to do that? He asked. She did not even look up. My father's ranch, outside of Flagstaff, she said, hammering a nail. We ran cattle. Had a ranch? He asked. She drove the last nail home and finally looked up at the long fence line ahead. Had, she said, and moved on to the next post. Ethan stood there for a second. You want to talk about it? No, she said, plain and simple, and kept right on walking. He followed her anyway, not quite sure why. It was like he recognized her silence from somewhere deep inside himself. My wife died, he said suddenly. 3 years back. Lydia stopped, but did not turn around. I am sorry to hear that, she said. A fever, he continued. It came on fast. I was 4 days out on a cattle drive. By the time I got back, he trailed off. There was not much left for me here. I kept the place going, but my heart was not in it. She finally turned to look at him, her eyes seeming to understand everything. That makes sense, she said quietly. He had expected pity or some clumsy words of comfort, but her simple understanding felt more real. That night, she cooked again. He came in from the barn to the smell of fried eggs, salt pork, and fresh biscuits. She was already at the table eating. "You do not have to do this," he said, sitting down. "I know," she replied. "I like to cook. And besides," she added, looking up at him, "you look like a man who has not had a decent meal in a long, long time." He did not argue with that. He just ate. The quiet between them felt different now, charged with something unspoken. "Tell me about this land," she said after a bit. "What was it like before?" He looked at her, confused. "Why?" "Because," she said, "the way a man talks about his land before things went wrong tells you what it can be again." He felt something stir inside him. "There was a creek that ran all year," he said slowly. "Clara planted 4 apple trees beside it. I do not even know if they are still alive." He paused. "The south pasture had good grass before the drought. I had 12 head of cattle when I started," he went on. "Down to 4 now. Lost some, sold some. I just could not find it in me to build the herd back up." "But you care now," she stated, more than asked. "What makes you say that?" he asked, surprised. "Because you are talking about it like it is still real," she answered. Ethan felt like she could see right through him. He stood up abruptly. "I am going to fix the latch on that corral gate," he announced, and walked out into the night. But on the morning of the second day, everything changed. He heard a horse coming up the drive, riding hard and fast. It was his neighbor, Tom Briggs, and his face was pale with worry. "Ethan," he said, his voice tight with urgency, "did you hear what happened in town last night?" "I have not been to town," Ethan replied. "Jed Holloway," Tom said, leaning down from his saddle. "The county marshal served him papers. Says he owes some old debt on his land from 5 years ago. They gave him 30 days to pay up or get out." Ethan felt a chill go down his spine. "That cannot be right. Jed's family has owned that land since 1879. "I know," Tom said. "But the papers look legal. And there is a new fellow in town named Victor Hale. He's been at the saloon, asking about who owns what and where the railroad might be coming through. He is a land speculator, Ethan, the kind that preys on folks like us. And Jed's place is just the beginning." Ethan stood there silent for a long moment, the weight of it all settling in. What was a man like Jed Holloway supposed to do? He had a wife and 2 kids with no money to fight something in court. Tom Briggs shook his head from his saddle. "I am riding out to warn whoever I can today. I figured you should know, Ethan. Your land sits right between the 2 water sources, making it mighty valuable." Ethan glanced over at the fence line they had just repaired. He saw the patch of garden Lydia was already working to bring back to life. "I hear you," he said. "Thank you, Tom." When his neighbor was gone, Ethan just stood there in the yard. He heard footsteps behind him. "You heard that?" he asked without turning. "Yes," said Lydia. He spoke the man's name, Victor Hale. He felt her go still and hard as an old oak. When he turned to face her, her expression was like stone. Whatever peace she had found was gone. In its place was something raw and painful. "You know that name," Ethan said. It was not a question. Her jaw was clenched tight. "Yes," she said, her voice flat. It was the kind of controlled voice that has already walked through fire. "I know that name." The silence hung heavy in the air. "Tell me," Ethan said. She finally looked him in the eye, and for the first time, Lydia Hart did not look broken, but like something strong that had cracked just enough to see the hard darkness inside. "My father's ranch," she said, "the one near Flagstaff. Victor Hale took it." She told him the entire story right there at his table. The words came out steady and relentless, like a terrible record she had been forced to learn by heart. Her family had owned that land for 11 years. Her father, Daniel Hart, had built the place from nothing but dust and determination. It was the kind of stubborn land that only gives back when a person refuses to give up on it. They had cattle and a good garden. Then Victor Hale came to the territory 2 years back. He had railroad money and an army of lawyers. He bought land from anyone willing to sell. And for those who were not willing, he always found another way. For her father, the way was a forged debt, a lie tied to a water agreement from 15 years before. A single word was changed on a piece of paper. It turned a neighborly agreement into a claim on their whole ranch. The forgery was good enough for the county judge, who just so happened to have received a large donation from Hale. He ruled in Hale's favor without much thought. "We had 2 weeks," Lydia said. "The courts dismissed our appeals. We were told to vacate. My father refused to leave. They sent men to make him. He is not a violent man, so he did not fight them. But when a man builds something for 11 years, and someone takes it with a piece of paper, something inside just breaks." She looked up, her eyes empty. "He had a stroke," she said, 3 months ago. "He is alive, but he cannot work. He can barely speak. That is why I was on that wagon train. I was trying to get to family in New Mexico. I have nothing left in Arizona." Ethan sat in silence. "And now Victor Hale is here," he said. "Yes," she whispered. "Now he is here." Ethan thought of Jed Holloway. He thought of his own land, the North Creek and the South Pasture. "He will come for my land," Ethan said. "Your land has water," she said softly. "In a drought year, that is worth more than anything. Yes, he will come for it." Ethan stood up and walked to the window, his back to her for a long moment. "That deal you wanted," he said, "for 3 days of work." She watched him. "That was yesterday's offer," he said, turning to face her. "I am changing the terms." He held her gaze. "You stay as long as you need to. In exchange, you tell me everything you know about Victor Hale, how he works, how he thinks, and what he is afraid of." Lydia Hart stared at him, and Ethan watched something shift in her face. It was not relief, not really. It was more like the feeling a person gets when they have been bracing for a hard fall for so long they forgot what it felt like to stand on solid ground. "All right," she said quietly. "All right," he said back. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan Cole felt like fighting. He did not sleep that night. He sat in the dark, thinking. By the time gray light touched the windows, he had decided on one thing. He needed to ride into town. He needed to see this man with his own 2 eyes. A person has to know what they are really dealing with. He found Lydia in the kitchen, already up with coffee made. "I am riding to town," he said. She turned, her eyes clear, telling him she had not slept either. "You are staying here." She opened her mouth to argue. "This is not for your protection," he said, cutting her off. "This is strategy. If one of Hale's men sees your face, we lose our advantage before we even know what it is. He collects information before he moves. So do I." She closed her mouth, thought about it, and nodded once. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "I want to see the papers he served Jed Holloway," Ethan said, "and I want to look this man in the eye." She was quiet for a moment. "He will be polite," she said at last. "That is the first thing to know. He is not what you expect. He will be well-dressed, well-spoken. He will shake your hand and make you think he is a reasonable man. That is what he does. He makes you feel like the robbery is a reasonable thing." Ethan drank his coffee. "I have dealt with reasonable men before. Not like this one," she said quietly. "When he came to our place, my father gave him coffee. He sat at our table and told my father how much he respected what he had built there. He said he was offering a chance to resolve the matter before it became unpleasant. And my father shook his hand. Her jaw tightened. "A man who makes you shake his hand while he is stealing from you is the most dangerous kind there is. Watch his hands," she said. "He is always touching things, moving them around. He does it so you watch his hands instead of his face. It is deliberate." "You have thought about him a lot," Ethan said. "Every single day for 3 months," she answered. "When a man takes everything from you, you get to know him real well, whether you like it or not. He grabbed his hat from the hook, but then he stopped. "You said he faked that water rights agreement." He turned back to her. "Do you have the original or anything that proves it is a fake?" A flicker of something crossed her face, not quite hope, but not quite hurt either. "My daddy kept it," she said, "in a lockbox under the floorboards. But the box was gone when they threw us out. Ethan took that in. That man had his people take it," she added. "He was a careful planner." Ethan put his hat on and walked out. Dry Creek was usually quiet, but today it was different. Folks were huddled up, talking low and serious. Mabel Greer over at the general store just stared at him from her window, no friendly wave today. The whole town felt spooked, like a herd of cattle sensing a storm on the wind. He went to see Jed Holloway first. Jed was sitting in the back of the hardware store, just staring at a piece of paper. Jed was not working. He just sat there, his hands flat on the table, looking at a document like he was trying to read a foreign language. He looked up when Ethan walked in, and you could see the relief on his face. "Ethan," he said. Ethan pulled up a chair. "Let me see it." Jed slid the paper over. Ethan read it through twice. He was no lawyer, but he knew what a real deed was supposed to look like. He saw a part about a debt tied to a note from 1881, supposedly signed by Jed's father. "Did your father sign any notes in 1881? Ethan asked. Jed's jaw got tight. "My father passed on in 1879. Ethan looked up from the paper. It was a clear forgery. He told Jed, "This is for a court to handle. You will need a lawyer." "I cannot afford a lawyer, Ethan." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Who else got one of these?" "Minnie Calhoun got one this morning," Jed said. "And I hear Pete Reyes is next. It ain't random, Ethan. He is going after the good water. He wants the land near any natural spring or creek." Ethan remembered what Lydia had told him. "Your own land is sitting right between two water sources. Has anyone spoken to this fella?" Jed nodded. He called it an opportunity. Ethan stood up, his mind made up. "Do not sign anything," he told Jed. "Not a single thing, you hear me?" Jed looked up at him. "You know about this man?" "I know enough," Ethan said. "I will be in touch." He found Victor Hale at the hotel saloon. Hale was at a corner table with two men who were clearly his guards watching the room. Hale himself was looking over papers by the window, a coffee cup near his hand. He looked just like Lydia described him, a well-dressed, calm man. Money and patience had put him together. He smiled when Ethan approached. "Good morning," he said. "You look like a man with something on his mind." "I am Ethan Cole," Ethan said. "My place is 4 miles east of here." "Ah," Hale put his papers down. "I was planning on writing out your way, Mr. Cole. Your property is an interesting piece of land, good high ground and two natural water sources nearby." "My land is not for sale," Ethan stated plainly. "Most things are not until they are," Hale said, smooth as silk. Ethan met his gaze, remembering what Lydia told him. Watch his face, not his hands. And in Victor Hale's face, Ethan saw the most dangerous thing of all, a deep, unshakable patience. "I will be watching," Ethan said. "Whatever you are planning in this county, I will be watching." Hale just tilted his head. "I would expect that from a good landowner." He then set his cup down softly. "I surely hope, Mr. Cole, that you are not letting outsiders with their own plans influence you." He paused, his voice getting even softer, the way a threat does when it does not want to sound like one. A man all alone with no family and no friends. He ought to be real careful who he listens to. Ethan stood his ground. "Careful is a good word," he said. "I have always liked it." He turned and walked right out of there. He pushed his horse hard on the way back home. His mind was racing, and he needed the ride to keep up with his thoughts. Victor Hale had made two things crystal clear. One, he was coming for Ethan's land. And two, he knew Ethan was not working alone. When he got back to his yard, Lydia was by the fence line, fixing it with some kind of tool. He rode straight over to her. She saw the look on his face, and her hands just stopped moving. "He knows you're here," Ethan said, getting off his horse. She did not seem surprised, just tired of being right. What did he say? He never said your name. He did not have to. He warned me about taking advice from outsiders, and he looked at me like he already knew a secret I did not. Lydia put her tool down. That is how he operates. He gets to a new town and he buys information. Before anyone knows what is happening, he knows who is who and what is what. Who in Dry Creek would tell him about you? Ethan asked. She thought for a second. The man at the feed store. He picked up the tools she had. Late in the afternoon, while they were mending the corral gate, Lydia finally spoke. It was the document he used on my father. She said it had more wrong with it than just a faked signature. Ethan watched her. The notary seal, she explained. Every legal paper in this territory gets a seal from the county court that handles it. Ours was stamped Maricopa County. She paused, her voice tight. But the water rights it was tied to were filed in Yavapai County back in 1871. Any change to a Yavapai filing has to be notarized in Yavapai, not Maricopa. She shook her head. I did not catch it until it was far too late. Ethan stayed quiet, letting it all sink in. If Jed's paper is also a fake, the mistake might be different, she added. Hale is a smart man. He learns from his past. But there is always something wrong with a forgery. You just have to know where to look. She sighed. The trouble is, knowing what to look for and having an expert witness are two different things. Is there anyone in the territory who could? Ethan asked. Someone who knows land records? Who could spot a fake seal in court? Yes, she said. A man in Prescott named Aldridge. He used to be a federal land examiner. She hesitated. But getting him here, building a case, Hale will have this all wrapped up in a few weeks, maybe sooner. Then we have to move in days, Ethan stated flatly. She stared at him. You mean it? You told me this land was worth fighting for, he said. You told me Jed Holloway was worth it. I did not ride into town and face that man just to come back here and sit on my hands. You hardly know Jed, she said, her voice soft. No, Ethan admitted. But I know what it is like to have land and then to lose the one thing that gave it meaning. I'm not about to watch Hale do to Jed and Minnie Calhoun and Pete Reyes what someone should have stopped from happening to your father. Lydia turned back to the fence post and drove the last nail home, straight and true. Aldridge, she repeated. If anyone in Prescott can prove the forgery in court, it is him. Can we reach him by telegraph? Maybe, if the office in town agrees to send it. Then write it all down tonight, Ethan said. Everything you remember about those papers. I will write it to town at dawn. She was quiet for a good long while. Ethan, she finally said, her voice careful. Why are you doing this? 3 days ago you did not even know my name. He did not answer right away. He just picked up his tools and started for the barn, and she walked alongside him. After a few steps, he spoke without looking at her. You told me my land is still real because I speak of it in the present tense. She nodded. Well, you still talk about your father's ranch that way. You say, it is good land, not it was. He pushed the barn door open. You're not done fighting for it either. You just ran out of road. For 3 years, Ethan Cole had not cared about much. But as he moved through the lamplight, he was a man with a purpose again. Lydia watched him for a moment, then went inside to write. An hour later, he found her at the kitchen table with 3 pages of neat handwriting laid out before her. The details were clear and precise. She looked up, her face a mix of exhaustion and resolve. It was the look of someone who had carried a heavy burden all by herself for too long. Is this enough? He asked her. It is all I have, she answered. Then it will have to be enough, he said. He went to bed that night thinking of Victor Hale, of Jed Holloway's father, and of Lydia writing out the truth by the light of a single lamp. And then a cold, clear certainty settled in his soul. Victor Hale figured that when a man gets knocked down, he stays down. Hale was about to get a hard lesson on the subject. At first light, the telegram was on its way. Ethan rode into town before most folks were even awake. The telegraph operator, a young fellow named Curtis, read the message twice. His eyebrows nearly touched his hairline. "This is some mighty official talk for a rancher," Curtis said. "Just send it," Ethan told him, laying the money down. Every last word. Curtis sent it. The ride home was faster. Being in town with Hale's men watching from the saloon porch made his gut twist. One of them, a big man in a gray coat, had watched him go in and come out. It was not quite a threat, but it was meant to be. Ethan stared right back at him until the man looked away. It was a small win, but he would take it. When he got back, Lydia had already cleared half the old garden plot. She was tearing out 3 years of tough roots, her hands wrapped in sackcloth. "Did you send it?" she asked. "Every word," he answered. "Now we wait." She just nodded and went back to work. He saw then how she handled fear. She did not sit with it, she fought it, attacking each root like an enemy. He went and got another fork. They worked side by side all morning. By noon, you could see the promise of a garden again. This was her garden, Lydia stated more than asked. Ethan stuck the fork in the dirt. She grew tomatoes, beans, squash. He paused. "I reckon I let it go because it hurt too much to look at." "I can understand that," Lydia said. "Still," he said, looking at the bare patch of earth, 3 years is a long time. It is late in the season for most things," she said. "But winter squash, if we plant it now, we could have a harvest by November." She knelt and crumbled a handful of soil. "This ground is not as dead as you think. There is still life in it." She looked up at him, a small smile on her face. "Good land always holds on longer than you expect." Ethan knew she was not just talking about the garden. The reply from Prescott came the next morning. Curtis himself rode all the way out to deliver it. That told Ethan all he needed to know. Whatever that paper said, it was important. Dropped. Just then, a rider came with a telegram for Lydia. She read it, then handed it to Ethan. It was from a lawyer in Phoenix, a man named Aldridge. "Ethan, he says he will come," she told him. "He needs the original papers Hale used on your family, or at least copies with a Clear County stamp. He thinks he can help if the forgeries match what he saw down in Maricopa County 2 years ago. Somebody else tried to fight Hale back then. It did not work out, but Aldridge kept all his notes." Lydia was quiet for a minute. "The papers he served my father," she said slowly. "I told you they were in the lockbox that was stolen." But she stopped. "There was a copy filed with the court. When we first tried to fight it, we had to submit the document as evidence. The court would have made a copy for their records. It is not the original, but it is a certified court record." Ethan understood. A certified copy from the court is as good as the real thing in the eyes of the law. And if it has the same fake seal, she took a deep breath, that is enough for Aldridge to start. "How do we get it?" "The court records are in Prescott," she said. "I would have to go myself, and that means leaving here." "I will go with you," Ethan said without a second thought. She gave him that look again, the one that was halfway between surprise and suspicion. "That is a 2-day ride each way. I know how far it is to Prescott," he said. "Tom Briggs owes me a favor. He can watch the place for 4 days." She was still quiet. "Lydia," he said her name, and she looked right at him. "Victor Hale is already making his moves. Jed Holloway might have 30 days on paper, but Hale will not wait that long to squeeze him and the others. Every day we waste is another day he wins." He held her gaze. "We have to make the first move." She looked at the telegram one last time. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow at dawn," he replied. They left before the sun was fully up. He came back with a pair of boots that had belonged to his late wife, Clara. He had not been able to look at them for 3 years. He just set them on the table. "Try these," he said, and walked out before she could say a word. When they rode out, she was wearing them. The next morning they rode out. About 2 hours from town, Ethan saw him, a rider about half a mile back. The man had been there for a while, keeping the same distance, never getting closer or farther away. "Do not turn around," Ethan said in a low voice to Lydia. "How long has he been there?" she asked, her hand steady on the reins. "Since we left town," he said. "Gray coat, big horse. He is one of Hale's men, for sure. So Hale knows we are going somewhere, she said flatly. He just does not know where. He sent that man to find out. What is the plan? She asked. Ethan thought for a moment. He knew this road well. About 6 miles ahead, the road forks. The main trail is wide open, but another one cuts south through a canyon. It is rougher, but those canyon walls will make us disappear. There's a fork in the trail ahead, he said, his voice low and urgent. When I give the signal, we ride hard. You understand? How hard? She asked. Hard enough that he loses us before he even knows which path we took. She gave him a look. I can ride. I know. No, she insisted. I can really ride. Don't you dare slow down on my account. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Then try to keep up. He kept their horses at a steady, calm pace, watching the fork get closer. 1/2 mile. He could feel the rider behind them, still patient, still waiting. 200 yards out, Ethan yelled, "Now!" He didn't look back. He heard the thunder of her horse's hooves right beside his as they veered onto the narrow canyon trail. The stone walls rose up around them, swallowing them whole. He pushed them hard for a full mile before finally pulling his horse to a stop deep within the passage. Lydia reined in beside him, breathing hard but smiling. She looked back down the trail. Nothing, she said with a sharp exhale. He'll never know which way we went. Been a while, Ethan said. Long enough. She stared straight ahead, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. You knew this trail, he said. Rode it with Clara before the road came through. He knew it would add 2 hours to their travel, but she just said, "It's worth it." And he agreed. That night they stopped at a small homestead owned by a couple named Fisk. They were good people, Ethan knew, who offered a bed in exchange for a little help in the morning. Before anyone was even up for breakfast, Lydia had fixed a broken step on the porch. Mrs. Fisk watched her with that quiet, knowing look that women who work the land give to each other. Over dinner, Mrs. Fisk, a woman who had earned her plain speech, looked right at them. "Are you two married?" she asked. Lydia froze. "No, ma'am," Ethan answered. Mrs. Fisk just looked at him. "You have been alone since Clara passed." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "That is a long time to be alone," she said, passing the bread, and that was that. But Ethan felt Lydia's eyes on him for a long moment after. They got to Prescott on the afternoon of the second day. The man at the Territorial Court Records Office, a clerk named Marsh, had the look of someone who had stopped caring 30 years ago. Lydia told him what she needed. A certified copy of a document from the Heartland Appeal, Yavapai County, 1883. Marsh vanished into the back. They waited for 20 long minutes. Ethan watched the door while Lydia sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. He realized she had learned how to wait like this in rooms where other people decided her fate. The knowledge that she'd had to learn such a thing made him angry. Marsh finally came back and slid a document onto the counter. Lydia leaned in to read it. Ethan watched her face and saw exactly what he had hoped to see. A sudden, sharp focus sparked in her eyes. "The seal," she said, her voice tight. "Maricopa," Ethan said, reading over her shoulder. "A Yavapai County filing with a Maricopa notary seal." She looked up at the clerk. "Is Mr. Aldridge's office still on Gurley Street?" Mr. Marsh just blinked. "Yes, ma'am. 3rd door past the assay office." She was already heading for the door, and Ethan followed right behind her. Franklin Aldridge was a man of about 60, with a face that had seen a lot of sun before it settled behind a desk. He listened to Lydia's story without a single interruption. He studied the certified copy for a long time. Then he set it down. "I have seen this seal before," he said. The world seemed to stop for a second. "Not this paper," Aldridge clarified, "but this notary stamp. Look at the number right below it. 1147. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file. "This is from a case in Maricopa County from 1881. He laid the paper down. Different land, different county, same fake debt, and the exact same stamp number. He tapped the page. A notary seal number is one of a kind. This stamp, 1147, belonged to a notary in Phoenix who retired in 1879. His seal was reported stolen after he died. Aldridge looked up at them. Victor Hale has been using a dead man's stolen seal for at least 4 years. The room was dead silent. Lydia finally let out a long, slow breath. "Can you testify to that in territorial court?" Ethan asked. "I have been waiting 2 years for somebody to bring me enough to do just that," Aldridge said plainly. "I had the Maricopa case, but Hale paid the family just enough to make them go away before we got to court." He closed the file. "If you can get me in front of a judge in Dry Creek with this, I can build a case that will throw out every single document with that seal on it." He paused for a moment. "Every last one." Ethan looked at Lydia. She was staring at the paper, and on her face was something he had never seen before. It was not relief, not yet. But it was the beginning of it, like the first sliver of dawn after a long, dark night. "My father's land," she whispered. "If the document that took it has this same seal, then the whole claim was a fraud from the start," Aldridge said. "That means the ruling can be challenged." His voice was steady, not promising anything easy. "It will not be simple, but it is possible." He watched her, knowing no words of his could help. She straightened up, her chin held high. "When can you get to Dry Creek?" "Give me 2 days to get my papers in order," Aldridge said. "I will ride out after that. We need you there before Hale can push these claims through." Ethan said he has already served the papers. He will be asking for a court date this week. "Then I will come in one day," Aldridge stated simply. "I will leave in the morning." He stood and shook Ethan's hand. He then turned to Lydia, this woman who carried 3 years of loss in her eyes, and held out his hand. "Your father built something worth fighting for," he said. "I'm sorry it took so long for someone to help you do it." Lydia took his hand, unable to trust her own voice. Within the hour, they were riding hard for Dry Creek. They had to get back before Aldridge and before whatever Hale was planning. They rode in silence, but it was a silence filled with purpose now. About an hour from Prescott, Lydia finally spoke. "Back in Aldridge's office, when he mentioned my father's land could be challenged," she paused. "I need you to know I came to your ranch for 3 nights of shelter. That was all. But I stayed because I thought I could help. Hearing Tom Briggs say Victor Hale's name was no accident to me." Ethan rode beside her for a spell. "You think you came to my ranch for a reason," he said. "I think I found the right place," she answered carefully. "I do not believe we always know our reasons ahead of time. Sometimes you just keep going until you find solid ground." He thought about his empty house and the smell of her warm bread that hit him like a memory. He thought about the list she made of everything wrong with his ranch, a list she gave him like a present. "Lydia," he said. "Yes." He kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "I am glad you stayed longer than 3 days." The quiet hung between them for a moment. "Me too," she said. They pushed their horses hard. Behind them, Franklin Aldridge was already building the case that could tear Victor Hale's whole empire down. And up ahead in Dry Creek, Hale himself had no idea. The woman he ran off her land had spent 3 months becoming the perfect tool for his own destruction. They hit Dry Creek 2 hours before sundown and knew right away that something was wrong. It was a feeling in the air. The main street seemed crowded. 2 men Ethan had never seen before stood guard outside the hotel. Tom Briggs was on the porch when they got to the ranch, his face pale with the same look it had when he warned Ethan about Jed Holloway. He was carrying bad news. "What happened?" Ethan asked, swinging down from his horse. Tom stood. Hale moved fast. "He's called an emergency hearing for the day after tomorrow," Tom said. "A judge is coming from Tucson." He paused. "Worse, he served Pete Reyes, Minnie Calhoun, and Frank Dodd yesterday." Tom looked at Lydia, now beside Ethan. "This morning, his man said Mr. Hale wants a meeting tonight. It was not a request." Ethan's jaw tightened. What time? 7. Back at their room, Lydia said, "He knows about Prescott. He's moving fast to beat us." Ethan agreed. "We need to show the others what we found. But first I have to go meet Victor Hale." "You are actually going?" Lydia asked, turning to him. "Yes," he said. "The best way to throw that man off is to show up looking completely calm." He went alone, leaving Lydia to her lists, which was her version of prayer. He rode into Dry Creek with the sunset. Hale sat at the same corner table. But Ethan saw something new in his eyes, a sharper focus. The not knowing was getting to him. "Mr. Cole," Hale gestured to the chair. "Thank you for coming." "Your invitation was hard to ignore," Ethan said as he sat. Hale got straight to business. "You went to Prescott." "A man is allowed to travel," Ethan replied. "You saw the court records, and you saw Franklin Aldridge," Hale said. "I have people there too. Whatever he told you, his evidence is weak." He put a folded document on the table. "I am here to offer you a better path. I will buy your ranch for 140% of its value. Cash, this week." Ethan looked at the paper, then back at him. "Why my ranch?" Hale's smile was thin. "The water. When the railroad comes, access rights will be worth 10 times my offer. This is not theft, Mr. Cole. It is a generous way out." The air grew still. Ethan remembered Lydia's warning. Hale makes everything sound reasonable. He pictured her father signing his life away. "You made the same offer to the Hart family in Flagstaff," Ethan said calmly. A shadow crossed Hale's face. "I have worked in many territories." "Daniel Hart," Ethan pressed. "Flagstaff, 1883. Water rights deal with a Maricopa seal on a Yavapai filing." He watched the man's face closely. "Are you going to tell me that seal number 1147 on your local papers is just a coincidence?" The feeling in the room changed. Hale did not crack, but he stiffened like a wall on a shaky foundation. "I think," Hale said quietly, "you should be careful about making accusations you cannot support." "I did not make an accusation," Ethan said pleasantly. "I asked a question." He stood and picked up his hat. "Day after tomorrow in court. Franklin Aldridge will answer it for everyone." He tipped his hat. "Good evening, Mr. Hale." He walked out, hands steady, heart hammering. He did not let it show as he crossed the street to his horse. He rode home fast. There was a lot of night left and plenty of work to do. By 9, they were all in Ethan's kitchen. Jed Holloway, Pete Reyes, a quiet man who missed nothing. Minnie Calhoun, 62 years old and tough, sat with her arms crossed, daring them to impress her. And Frank Dodd, weary from being dragged into a fight he was not sure of. Tom Briggs stood by the wall as Lydia took her place at the head of the table. The room went quiet when she started talking. She did not ask them to trust her. She simply put the court copy on the table beside Aldridge's comparison paperwork. Then she walked them through the seal numbers, calm as you please. "The paper used against my family carried notary seal number 1147, she said. "It is a dead man's stolen seal. Franklin Aldridge has documented its use elsewhere, and he is bringing that proof tomorrow." She met each of their eyes. "I need to know whose documents he can examine." Minnie Calhoun did not hesitate. "All of them," she said firmly. "Every last page." Pete Reyes nodded. "Same." Frank Dodd leaned forward, looking closely at the seal. "What if the seal is not on mine?" "Then Aldridge still shows a pattern of fraud," Lydia said calmly. "It casts a shadow on all of Hale's documents, including yours, but I will bet you find the seal. Men like him stick with what works." Dodd sat back. "All right, then." Jed, who had been quiet, finally spoke, his voice rough. "My father's signature is on that paper. Even if we win this, his name is still tied to that lie in the records." The kitchen was still. "That is what Aldridge does," Lydia said gently. "He does not just dispute the claim. He names the seal as a fraud. He clears your father's name. That is the whole point. Jed nodded, looking down. Good, he said quietly. That is good. Minnie reached over and patted his hand. She shook his hand once firmly, then let go. That was how a ranchwoman gave a hug. Aldridge says this changes everything from a simple land dispute to possible criminal fraud against a lot of folks. He paused. I want the county marshal in that courtroom tomorrow. The county marshal? Ethan asked, his voice low. He recently got a large donation for his office from someone who wishes to remain unknown. Aldridge looked between them. You think Hale bought him? We do not know for sure, Lydia said. That means we can't trust him, but we can't leave him out either. We have to act like the hearing is fair, but build a case so strong that any crooked dealings will be plain to see. Aldridge watched her for a second. You have given this a lot of thought. For 3 months? Yes, she said. He looked at Ethan. Is she always like this? Pretty much, Ethan said. Late that afternoon, Hale made his next play. Ethan was in the barn when Tom Briggs came riding in hard again. That frantic arrival was becoming a bad sign. Hale's men went to Jed's place, Tom said without stopping. 3 of them about an hour ago. They told Jed the court date is now tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. Said the judge had a change of plans. Tom's jaw went tight. They also told him the offer to buy his land is good until midnight tonight. After that, Hale takes the offer back and will use the law to take everything. Midnight. Ethan's mind raced. A 6 o'clock hearing meant the judge would rule before Aldridge could even show his evidence. Jed had less than 8 hours to decide. Take some money and lose his land or risk getting nothing in court at dawn. Is Jed going to hold on? Tom asked. He will hold, Ethan said, already moving. I am going to make sure he can. He looked straight at Tom. Are you with us, all the way? Tom Briggs had watched his county get picked apart for 2 years, hoping things would just get better on their own. Now he had to make a choice. All the way, Tom said. Ethan nodded. Then ride. He found Lydia right where he expected in the garden. When things got tense, she grounded herself with hard work. She saw him coming and looked up. He moved the hearing, she said, not even asking. 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, he confirmed. She stood, dusting the dirt from her hands. He is trying to get a ruling on the claims before Aldridge can present the fraud evidence. If the judge rules on even one property before we establish a criminal pattern, it makes everything harder. Can he do that? Get the judge to hear land claims before the fraud evidence? He can sure try, she said, already thinking ahead. We need Aldridge to file a motion tonight. It must ask for the fraud evidence to be heard before any property rulings. The judge has to see it before morning, so there is a record. Aldridge is at the hotel, Ethan said. Then we are going to the hotel, she replied. Hale's men are there. Then we will be careful about it, she said. He almost cracked a smile. You are not afraid of much, are you? She looked at him, and for just a second her strong front faded. He saw it was not a lack of fear, but a decision to work right through it. I am afraid of plenty, she said softly. I am afraid my father will not get better. I am afraid that even if we win, getting his land back will take more time than I can bear to think about. She paused. And I am afraid I have pulled you into a fight that could cost you what little you have left. She met his gaze. I am most afraid of that one. The quiet evening air settled around them. You did not pull me into anything, he said. I walked in with my own 2 boots on. Ethan. Lydia. His voice was steady, leaving no room for argument. My land is my land. My fight is my fight. I decided that the morning I faced Victor Hale in town. That had nothing to do with you. He took a breath. And everything you have done since you showed up. The fence, the garden, that telegram, none of that is a burden. Do you understand me? She just looked at him, really looked at him for a long moment. It was not the careful, guarded way she had before. This was something open and direct, and it hit him harder than he was ready for. I understand you, she said. Good, he replied. Now let's go get Aldridge. They slipped out the back and came around to the hotel's side entrance. Aldridge answered the door in his shirt sleeves, a man who seemed to be expecting a late-night knock. Ethan explained everything in 3 quick sentences. Aldridge had his coat on before the third one was finished. "I will write the motion tonight. I need the name of the county court clerk." "Harold Birch," Lydia said immediately. "He is home by 8. If the motion is on his desk by 9, he has to log it for tomorrow." Aldridge just stared at her for a second. "How do you know the clerk's evening routine?" "I asked the hotel cook when we arrived," she said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Aldridge glanced at Ethan. "Yeah," was all Ethan said. "All right," Aldridge nodded. "Give me 45 minutes." They waited in the hall. After a moment, Lydia spoke without opening her eyes. "When this is all over, no matter what happens, I want to go back to Flagstaff." Ethan stayed quiet. "Not to stay," she said. "Or maybe, I do not know. But I need to see my father. I need to tell him what we did here." She paused. "He needs to know that someone fought back. Even if we do not get the land back right away, he needs to know we fought." "We will get his land back," Ethan said. She opened her eyes. "You cannot promise that." "No," he admitted. "But Aldridge makes it possible. And possible is a whole lot more than you had 4 days ago." She looked at him a moment longer, then closed her eyes. "Yes," she said, "it is." Aldridge came out at 8:40 with 3 pages of carefully written law, his jaw set for a fight. They went straight to Harold Birch's house. A man in a house robe answered the door. Mr. Birch read the motion twice over. To his credit, he said nothing about the late hour. He simply stamped it and logged it into the court record at 8:57. It was done. Whatever Victor Hale had planned for the morning, he was walking into a courtroom with a surprise waiting for him. As they walked back toward the horses in the dark, Lydia suddenly stopped. "Listen," she whispered. From back at the hotel, they could hear 2 raised voices. One belonged to the big man who had been watching them for Hale. The other was sharp and angry. Ethan pulled Lydia into the shadows. They heard bits and pieces. "Aldridge filed something. Hale has to know tonight." The second man hurried back inside the hotel. The big man stood there for a moment, looking down the street like a man whose perfect plan was starting to fall apart. Ethan and Lydia did not move a muscle until he was gone. "They know," Lydia said softly. Ethan let out a slow breath. He said, "Yes. What does a man like Hale do when his perfect plan starts to unravel?" Ethan pictured those steady eyes, that practiced calm. "I honestly don't know," he finally admitted. She shifted beside him in the tight space, her shoulder nearly brushing his. He was keenly aware of how close she was. "That's the one thing I don't know about him either," she said. "How he acts when he can't control the outcome." She paused for a moment. "I reckon we're about to find out." The night was quiet all around them. Tomorrow at 6 in the morning at the Dry Creek Courthouse, everything they'd worked for would either stand strong or crumble to dust. You either move toward a thing or you do not. He glanced at Lydia there beside him in the dark. Her eyes were already fixed on the courthouse. "Try to get some sleep," he told her. "You first," she replied. Both of them knew it was a lost cause. 6 o'clock rolled in cold and gray. Ethan hadn't slept a wink, and he doubted Lydia had either. Still, she came out of the barn with her hair pinned up, wearing Clara's boots. She looked like a woman who had decided that whatever the day brought, she was going to meet it on her own 2 feet. They rode into town without saying much. All the words had been spent. What was left was a quiet understanding built over a week that felt more like a year. The others were already there. Jed Holloway stood with his wife, her jaw set firm. Pete Reyes was there, and Minnie Calhoun in her Sunday best, which looked more like a battle uniform on her. Frank Dodd, Tom Briggs, and Aldridge was at the door talking with Harold Birch. Hale showed up at 5:56 with his lawyer, a skinny fella from Tucson named Pratt. Hale himself looked completely calm, like a man who had a new trick up his sleeve. That was the version of Victor Hale that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Not the angry version, but the one that adapts. The judge, a heavy man named Carey, walked in at exactly 6:15. He looked a little surprised to see the room packed full. He started reading Aldridge's motion, and he read it for a long, long time. Pratt jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, this is just an attempt to muddy the waters of a simple property claim." "Sit down, Mr. Pratt," Judge Carey said, his eyes still on the paper. When he finished, he looked straight at Aldridge. "You're the examiner from Prescott?" "Yes, Your Honor, Franklin Aldridge. And I am prepared to testify that the notary seals on these claims are forgeries." Pratt was up again. "Your Honor, this is outrageous." "Mr. Pratt," the judge said, and his voice had a new kind of steel in it, "I have read the motion. I also took the liberty of calling the Federal Land Office in Prescott this morning. They confirmed Mr. Aldridge's credentials and his past findings on this exact notary seal." The silence in that room was heavy. "This hearing will address the fraud evidence first." Pratt fell back into his chair like a sack of grain. Ethan felt Lydia let out a breath she'd been holding. He looked over at Hale, and there it was. The first tiny crack in that perfect, calm mask. That fella Hale walked into the courthouse with a confidence that could move mountains, but he was about to run smack into a wall of pure, hard fact. He didn't count on Franklin Aldridge, who showed up with 3 years of paperwork and a dead man's stolen seal. For 40 minutes, Aldridge laid it all out. He wasn't emotional. He was just unshakably right. He gave the judge the registration number, the proof the original notary was long gone, and the report on the stolen seal. He showed how that same seal, number 1147, was used 4 different times on 4 different properties to cook up fake debts. Pratt, Hale's lawyer, tried to argue, but you can't argue with a number in a ledger. When Aldridge was done, the judge looked Hale square in the eye. "Mr. Hale," he said, "you got anything to say for yourself?" Hale stood up, and you could see the moment a man who built his empire on folks' fear realized the ground was giving way beneath him. "Your Honor," he started, "I was just acting in good faith. My lawyer gave me those papers." The judge's voice was flat as a skillet. "That same stamp number showed up 2 years ago on papers with your name on them, too. I'm not buying a good faith argument today." He glanced at the marshal, who had been hoping to stay out of it. "Marshal Webb, you best have a word with the prosecutor's office before Mr. Hale decides to leave town." The room got real quiet. The marshal just nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Hale stood there for a long moment, then slowly sat back down, a new kind of stillness on his face. He was a man recalculating his odds and coming up short. The judge then looked out at all the ranchers. "The claims against Holloway, Reyes, Calhoun, and Dodd are dismissed. This court will be forwarding its findings to the prosecutor." He paused. "Anything else?" That's when Lydia Hart stood up. The whole room turned to look at her. Even the judge gave her his full attention. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady and clear. "My name is Lydia Hart. My father lost his land in Flagstaff to a claim that used this very same seal. I am asking that your findings today be sent to the Flagstaff office as evidence to challenge that ruling." The room was dead silent. Pratt started to get up, but Hale put a hand on his arm, stopping him. Judge Carey looked at Lydia for a good long while. "Your request is noted and will be done," he said. Then he added, "I am sorry for your family's loss, Miss Hart. This will take time, but the record will now show the truth." Lydia sat down. Ethan didn't dare look at her, not then. He just looked at his own hands. The room emptied out slowly, folks talking in low voices, the tension finally breaking. Jed Holloway came over and shook Ethan's hand with both of his, no words needed. "Your father's name is cleared," Ethan told him. Jed just nodded, his throat tight. Minnie Calhoun walked by and gave Ethan's arm a firm squeeze, which for her was like a brass band parade. Frank Dodd stopped, looking a little sheepish. "I needed more convincing than I should have," he admitted. "I'll bring by some timber for that south pasture fence of yours next week." "I'll take it," Ethan said. Tom Briggs was the last one. He looked over at Lydia, who was talking with Aldridge, then back at Ethan. "She just came out of nowhere, didn't she?" Tom said. "She surely did," Ethan agreed. "Good thing for all of us." By midday, Hale was gone from Dry Creek with his lawyer, his men, and an informal escort from Marshal Webb. He left like a man who knows he's lost a battle, but not the war. Ethan watched him ride out, not feeling triumphant, just quiet and settled. It was the feeling of a long cattle drive finally done, the herd safe. Not glory, just completion. He turned and walked back to Lydia, who was waiting with the horses. "It's not over for my father," she said, stating it as a simple fact. "I know," Ethan said. "It could take months." "I know that too." He took the reins from her. "Aldridge said he'd handle sending the papers himself. He's heading to Flagstaff." She looked at him, surprised. "When did he say that?" "This morning. He also said, in his professional opinion, that with these findings on record, your father's case has a strong foundation. His word, strong." Lydia was quiet for a minute. "Strong," she repeated, testing the feel of the word. "Strong," Ethan confirmed. She nodded once, then she did a little thing he'd never seen before. She pressed her hand flat against her chest for just a second, as if to make sure her heart was still there. He looked away, giving her the moment. They rode home slow. There was no rush now. The urgency was gone, replaced by something calmer. "What will you do now?" Ethan asked her. She thought for a moment. "I need to go to Flagstaff, to tell my father in person, and to file the challenge myself. I want to be the one." "When?" he asked. "Soon," she said. "Maybe in a week." He rode on for a bit. "You'd come back," he said. It wasn't quite a question, not quite a statement. She gave him a sideways look. "The garden won't be ready for harvest for another month," she said. "Someone needs to be here for that." He didn't smile. He felt something a whole lot bigger than a smile. "The garden," he said, finding the word after so long. "And the apple trees," she added, her voice a little softer now. "You said you haven't been up to North Creek since Clara planted them. I would like to see if they're still growing." There was a small pause. "I would like to see what they became with no one watching over them." Ethan looked down the road. He pictured those apple trees growing for 3 years all on their own, pushing their roots deep into that dry soil, surviving longer than anyone would have thought. Good land always does. "I will take you up there," he said, "when you get back." "All right," she said. The week went by fast, filled with simple things. Lydia wrote some letters. She spent 2 afternoons in the garden, and by the end of the week, the winter squash was in the ground, and the soil was turned and ready for what was next. She fixed that back window latch on her last day, the very one she'd slipped through the night she first showed up. She did it quiet-like, without a word, and Ethan only found it that evening. He felt the clean, solid click of something finally made right, and just stood there a moment, his hand holding the window shut. The next morning, she came to the corral to say her goodbyes. She had her travel bag ready and was with the horse Tom Briggs had loaned her. She stood there in the yard with that same contained strength she'd had when she arrived, like she was carrying more than a person could see. But it was different now. Back then, she was carrying grief. What she carried now was harder to put a name to, but it had a direction. It was pointed toward a purpose. "The squash needs water every 2 days," she told him. He said, "I know how to water squash." "You have not watered a single thing in 3 years," she shot back. He could not argue with that. Every 2 days, he promised. She turned and gave him that full, unguarded look, the one he had only seen a time or two before. Ethan, she said, when I got here, I was at the end of my road. I just want you to know what you did was no small thing. For my father, for Jed, for all of them. She kept her voice steady, but it took some doing. You did not have to get involved in any of it. I know, he said. I am saying thank you, she said, plain and simple, so there is no mistaking it. He just looked at her for a good long while. Come back, he said. That is all I am asking. She held his gaze. I will come back, she promised. Then she rode out. He stood there and watched her go, long after the dust had settled and the morning turned quiet. Then he went to the barn, grabbed the watering bucket, and headed for the garden. She returned 6 weeks later. He knew it was her long before he could make out her face. He knew by the rhythm of the horse and the way she sat in the saddle, leaning forward with purpose. He was mending fence on the north side when she rode in. By the time he walked back, she was off the horse and turning to face him. She looked different, not lighter exactly. There was nothing light about what had happened, but a tension she had carried for months, that bracing for the next bad thing, was gone. How is he? Ethan asked. Alive, she said. Better than I thought. I sat with him and told him everything. He cannot talk much yet, but he understood me. I know he did, because he held my hand and did not let go for near an hour. Her voice trembled just a bit on that part. The challenge has been filed, she continued. Aldridge sent in all the paperwork. We got a different judge this time. It will take a while, but it is moving. That is good, Ethan said. Yes, she agreed. Good. Her eyes swept over the yard, taking in the new shingles on the barn and the tidy fence lines. She looked at the garden, where you could see the squash vines spreading out, just like she said they would. You watered every 2 days, she said. I said I would, he replied. A simple, complete look of gratitude crossed her face. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He took it and unfolded a rough pencil sketch of an orchard, drawn from memory. You could see 4 trees in a row, each one with its own personality, the spacing between them captured perfectly. I asked my father to draw it, she explained. He cannot write anymore, but he can still draw. That is how the apple trees looked when my mother first planted them. I figured if we are going to plant some by your North Creek, you ought to know how a proper orchard starts. Ethan looked at the drawing for a long time, at the 4 little trees sketched by a sick man from 30 years of memories. We will go up to the creek tomorrow, he said, and see what needs doing. Tomorrow, she agreed. Yes. He folded the drawing and tucked it into his shirt pocket, right over his heart. While she tended to her horse, he went back to his work, and the whole ranch seemed to settle into an easy rhythm, like a place where the right people are finally doing the right work. That evening, he walked in from the barn and the smell hit him, just like that first night. Warm bread, something savory cooking on the stove, the feeling of a real home that had been cold and empty for too long. Lydia was setting 2 plates on the table. It was just like that first night, but it was not like it at all. It was not a surprise or a question. It just felt like coming home. He sat down across from her, and the lamplight burned warm between them in the quiet kitchen. The garden will be ready in about 3 weeks, she said after a while. I know, he answered. We should think about the south pasture after that, she said, for the spring. I have been thinking on it, he said. She looked up at him. And I reckon it can hold 30 head, he continued, if we plant the right grass and manage the water. She just watched him for a moment. Her look was direct and warm, holding all the history of their hard work, the waiting and the drawing of an orchard tucked away in his pocket. 30 is a good number, she said. It is a start, he replied. They went back to their meal. Outside, the garden kept growing, in the dark. The young apple trees by the creek held fast in the soil, waiting for morning. The fences stood tall, and the lamp in Ethan Cole's window burned warm and steady, visible from a long way off. Only now it burned for 2. And Ethan, who had spent 3 years living in the dark on purpose, finally understood. He understood that the bravest thing a broken man can ever do is to let someone else light a lamp, and then choose, with both eyes wide open, to let the warmth back into his life.